Olá, sejam todas e todos bem-vindos a
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this Global Minute for the University Center about peace, justice, and solid institutions. The focus tonight, the second night actually, is institutions and education, international perspectives. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm Jason Diet, the Vice President of the Global Hub at UNINTER. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for the way you've welcomed me here at UNINTER in Curitiba. It's the first time I've physically visited the facilities, and I'd like to congratulate you all and thank you for all professors and the deans and all those professionals who are leading this institution today. These global meetings initiatives, it's very interesting. So most of the times I'm officially in the US, close to the UNINTER hub in Boston, and I'm gonna be very quick here today. We have two very interesting and excellent guests today to talk about their experience. We have Dr. Xiaonan Cao from the World Bank and Eduardo Queiroz from here in Brazil. And I'm going to talk very briefly about the event today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the framework that we're going to use today for the event. And then I'm going to start with questions and answers for each speaker. I'm going to start in English. We have simultaneous translation, and we are broadcasting at two UNINTER channel, the main group channel and also the Global Hub channel on YouTube. There's broadcasting it in English. Okay, now let me briefly introduce our speakers. I'm going to start introducing Eduardo Queiroz and then Professor Carolini, and then I'm going to go into English and carry on the conversation with Sean. Eduardo has a very interesting career that goes from private sector, government, NGOs, and foundations. He has lived, studied, and worked in Australia, Brazil, Canada, Mexico, and is currently based in Portland in the state of Oregon in the US. He's the vice president of the United Way Worldwide for Latin America and the Caribbean, and he's focused on the development of organizations that will positively impact the life of vulnerable families or living in vulnerability, and consequently change our society to a more equitable one. He's also a very good friend of mine. I had the pleasure to work with him in an impact project. I'm the live witnesses and I admire what he has managed to do, what he needs to do, and that's a very important part of navigating through complex and international issues. So it's an honor to have him here today. It's also a pleasure to be here for the first time next to my colleague, Caroline Cordero. She's professor and coordinator of the UNINTER's International Relations Program. And I'd say that he's a conspirator of our UNINTER Global Hub and what we've been doing. So it's extremely important to have this internal exchange and different perspectives that we have, and that's a mean of international hub. So now I'm gonna switch into English to introduce Sean.
a specialist, a senior specialist in education at the World Bank. He has a great deal of experience in project management. Throughout his career, he has worked in more countries than I could probably state in the time that we have, but his focus has been in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, and he's currently focused on the Middle East and Northern Africa, primarily in higher education. And so he will bring a perspective of higher education and of upper education, and Eduardo Queiroz is complementing that with a lot of work in early childhood. Agora vou trocar, assim, vou continuar agora a conversa em inglês.
I'm gonna go back to English, and then I'm gonna switch to Eduardo.
Jump right into it with questions. I'm very excited to have you here, so let me pause before hitting you with questions. I'd love to get your responses in roughly 2 minutes each. We want to keep this moving quickly, but thank you so much for being with us. Sean, you have
Thank you. Yeah.
You have an impressively diverse experience across different countries, continents, and sectors. Could you just please share some of your background with us about your personal and your professional trajectory?
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm very happy to be here and share my thoughts and my experience and background with the audience here. Hopefully it will be useful or will be a little bit inspiring for you to work on development. So I did not start with the development. I studied physics when I was at the college, and then I started to work at the Ministry of Education back in China. But I always wanted to do a PhD for some reason, because I'm from an intellectual family background. So that's why I came to Harvard University and did my PhD. So that was a sort of a decision, an important decision in kind of, the starting point of your career. And then during my time at Harvard, and I spent 2 years sitting on the editorial board of Harvard Educational Review, which is a top academic journal in the field of education. And what I realized is that the research is not really my sort of a passion, so to speak, I with the introduction of my professor, and I started to work on development. And that's how I got into the development field. And because I studied the education policy planning at Harvard, so I did my summer intern at the World Bank, and gradually was introduced and recruited by the World Bank. So I think these are the key sort of points. And after 2 years at the World Bank, I realized I wanted to get some private sector experience. So I left the World Bank. I joined Ernst & Young Consulting, and I worked for them for 2 or 3 years, and realized my passion still was on development. So I went back to the World Bank and started everything over again. And since then, I have been working at the World Bank in the field of education. So thank you very much.
That's great. And I think this event brings together students in very diverse courses, many of whom are switching between careers. And it's very interesting to see the importance that you just highlighted in terms of having a very strong educational foundation. But then over the course of your career, you've pivoted or changed what you use that education for, sounds like multiple times. So with that, could you talk a little bit about your current work in the Middle East and in Northern Africa, and what are your primary challenges in higher education and in making lasting institutional changes in the places that you're working? Because I know that there are a lot of differences in terms of context. What's it like in the places that you're currently working?
Yeah, so currently, I'm working for the region of Middle East. The full title for the region is Middle East and North Africa. So we call it the MENA region. So I'm working on 3 countries currently, Palestine, and Iraq, and Egypt. So I'm focused on higher education and across Middle Eastern countries. And main challenge higher education is facing is that many of their graduates they are unemployed. So this is a serious issue. It's not just the labor market issue, but it's also the social stability and, and so on and so forth, many things related. So this is the area I'm trying to work with the governments and agencies and help them to figure out what we can do to make the higher education more relevant to not just the labor market, but also to the national development, because sometimes the labor market does not necessarily reflect the national development priorities. It takes time to get the two sort of synced. So that's what the main challenge facing the region right now. So we have to start to address, not just the access issue to higher education, but also quality and, more importantly, relevance issue. And that will start to look into curriculum programs and the faculty qualification, and more importantly, partnership with the private sector and with the rest of international academic institutions.
So interesting. One of the things you brought up was that institutional change can take a lot of time. And I think it requires cultural understanding and knowing where it is that you're working, and what works in one place won't necessarily work in another. How have you approached the challenges of helping to bring lasting change or working towards lasting change in your role with the World Bank?
Well, first of all, the World Bank first of all, let me try to explain and demystify this. The World Bank works with the government. The World Bank does not work with a particular institution or organization. I receive this question a lot. So that's one thing. So how we work with the government? We usually look at the country's development plan and strategy, and what is the priority, and then sit down with the government to have a discussion what we can do to support the government, the country's development agenda, and through kind of a partnership. So under that partnership umbrella, and we will start to work on different programs and different sectors. So in my case, I work in the sector of education. So we will do from the early childhood, which you will hear a little bit later, all the way to postgraduate, basically, the whole spectrum of the education sector. Now, there are a lot of challenges, as you can imagine. You think about Brazil, I think, every country facing a lot of challenges in the field of education. It's not just the fast changing environment globally and regionally and nationally, but also the context is changing, and the way people learn things are also different now. We all know we have cell phone, we have tablets, and those 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it didn't exist for being used to deliver education. So now we have students coming to the classrooms. It doesn't matter at what level, they already have some access to this huge body of knowledge and information. So that presents a challenge to teachers and professors, how they can guide students and help them to learn, and instead of traditionally just sort of passing on the knowledge. And now that role can be replaced by internet, by other packaged learning deliveries, and of course online courses. So these are the challenges we see from all the countries. Of course, how to tackle these challenges are very different, and the country and the governments, they have different priorities, and to address a variety of challenges. And some started from very young, focusing on early childhood education. Some started to focus on the vocational education because this is the mid-body in society and require a lot of people to have the right skills in today's economy. And some were focusing on higher education in order to bring up the country's research and applied research capability so the countries can move forward, not being left behind. So this is basically how we work with the government and with the country. Of course, once we decide the area we were going to work together, and then we will develop the projects and have a project design, preparation, and then move to implementation and focusing on results. So we want to see the results actually come out from the investment. So this is basically how the workflow at the World Bank in kind of general terms.
Perfect. So you struck earlier on the career that you've had in different sectors, and I'm just curious because we know that making change takes a lot of time. You talked about some of the differences within the context of the World Bank there. What's been the difference in each of the environments in terms of university, where you've spent a lot of time, in government, where you've spent some time in NGOs, and in private sector consulting? How does changing institutional norms or habits or making lasting change differ in those environments in your career?
Yeah, thank you. Very good questions. So I think most important thing is that you, for any new project and country you start to work on, you really need to do a lot of background study. You need to understand the political situation in the country. You need to understand the demographic condition and what the population you are dealing with. And you need to, of course, know the socioeconomic status at the individual level. And because the World Bank's mission is to reduce the poverty and share prosperity, these are the two aspects of what we do at the World Bank. So with all those in mind, and as you said that, Jason, institutional change is a long process, and most importantly involves a mindset change, and that is not easy. Not just you say, okay, here is what's done in Brazil, and it's quite successful, and let's just move that to, let's say, Egypt. So often that doesn't work. You have to really contextualize and find out why it is successful in Brazil, this program. What are the key ingredients made it successful? And then we will see whether there are such conditions and ingredients in place in Egypt. And then so we can help them design something which will fit into their context and make it work. The very important part is that you have to get buy-in from the people who will be impacted by the change. It's not just like, okay, we parachute and landed in the country and tell the country, this is what you need to do. And it's not like that. And we were through what we call project identification process and meet with all stakeholders and listen to them. The listening is a very important attributes you need to have, and listen to them and discuss with them to see what they feel comfortable to make a change. You cannot start with a drastic change. No one is going to follow and do it. You definitely will fail. And you need to start with the low-hanging fruits for people to see that these change actually produce the results and they benefited from it. And so sort of one after another, you build on each of these incremental small steps and lead to what you would like to see, a bigger institutional change. And this is a very long process. It would take about 5 to 10 years usually to see some results of institutional change. And USAID also supported several countries to make such institutional change at the university level. And for example, in Tanzania, they had a 5 years project and helped the institutions to develop steps and for change. And this is a very long kind of a process, require good engineering, goodwill, and good leadership, and also more importantly, as I said, buy-in from the majority of the people is going to be affected by the policy change. You cannot get everyone agree with you, but if you can get the majority of them and on your side and use them to champion for the change you would like to see, this is more likely to be successful.
So that's one question that I have. The pandemic, which has impacted, of course, the entire globe, forced a lot of change. So you just mentioned the amount of time it takes to plan and to make change happen is measured in years and decades. But COVID has forced a lot of change. How has the pandemic impacted your work?
Yeah, I think a pandemic and a lot of people, working from home and a lot of education delivery moved to online. There are downside of that, because this education process is an interactive process and need human touch. But without the human touch and everything move online, and that caused some issues because not everyone is the same, and certain people need specific attention, and that is hard to do online. However, given all the challenges, what we have observed is that countries actually are very agile. They quickly move the things online, but also they quickly train teachers. And teachers are also willing to make the change, being forced basically. And in a very short period of time, changed their pedagogy, the way they used to teach, because teaching online is very different from teaching in the classroom. And you have to repackage the content and so on and so forth. So the positive part of this pandemic is that it accelerated the change in terms of the ways of delivery and in terms of pedagogy change and in terms of teacher development and in terms of making more learning materials available online. So those are the positive changes. And of course, the institutional change is also part of that. We haven't had enough time, I'm sure, for many institutional leaders to really look into the different parts of management and figure out how going forward we can manage the institution in a more effective and efficient way. I think people start to think about that. The good thing is that everyone agree that post-pandemic will be different, and it no longer business as usual, and that is everyone agrees. But how to sort of make a sustainable change, and people have different views and different ways to do things. So these parts remaining to be seen. But for my work, the most thing affected by the pandemic is that we cannot travel, we cannot go to the country. And so that means we cannot really get closer to the people we serve. And that, to some extent, slow down the implementation of the projects. However, through emergency channels, we provided additional services, not just the vaccine, school hygiene and security, and so on and so forth. So it's been done in different ways, but we all hope that we can start to travel again and being able to meet with the people we serve.
Great. So I'm going to give you one more question, and then I really look forward to having you back when Professor Carolini is doing the moderation of questions coming from the audience. But the last question I have for you before turning to Eduardo is for students. So there are students from all sorts of areas on the line now. And for those who are looking at potential careers at multinational institutions, or people who just want to strengthen institutions in general, what advice would you have for them in terms of getting involved?
Okay, I think, I wish that some of the audience will, when they will start to work on development, because every country needs a cadet of qualified and skilled people to work on development. How to get into the field? First of all, I think you need to think big, but you need to really start from small steps, build up. And the first thing is that you probably should get your, what here we say, get your feet wet, meaning you start to, for example, using your internship opportunities to get involved in grassroots initiatives. Either this is to help kids from poor communities to improve their language or mathematics or other things, or to help adults to get involved in skill change so they can catch up with the changing society. So whatever you are interested, and you should probably, before you graduate, and if you want to pursue a career in development, is trying to use the internship opportunity to find out, not just getting practical skills, but also find out whether this is truly something you are interested in and you have a passion about. But with that, you also need to develop your skills, not just the personal skills, but the skills required for doing development work. From the top part, you probably will like to develop skills in project management. And for the smaller part, you may want to develop analytical skills and to really trying to do things more evidence-based. This is even not just a big policy, but even for smaller decisions, based on data, based on evidence, and then really sort of do a lot of reading and find out what experts say about this topic. And also through the internet, find out what are the good practices out there and see what can be contextualized and you can apply in the situation you are in. So with all those, you basically gradually sort of develop your skills. And through that whole process, I'm sure you would develop your contact as well. If you are very interested in regional development agencies, like Inter-American Development Bank, or the global one like the World Bank, what you can do is that they advertise all the positions on their website. You just need to sort of go to their website to find out what are the opportunities there for young people. They all have the programs for junior officers. They also have programs for summer interns. They have programs for young professionals, and they have programs for mid-career people. So you just need to see at what level your skills, experience, and is matched to the expectation. So this is a process, and I hope that besides internship, and you may also want to get involved in some consultancy work. You can work with your professor. Usually professors, they get consultancy contracts, and that's a good place for you to get involved. And through that process, you can get to know other people, other agencies, and learn the methodology and develop your skills. So I hope these are useful tips.
Great, absolutely. So thank you so much, Sean. We look forward to having you back when we're at the panel with Carol. Agora eu vou trocar para o português. Eu acho que eu vou pegar pouco esse gancho.
I'm gonna switch to Portuguese now. I'm gonna carry on what Sean just said. It's important to talk about contact. We like to invite people with international perspective, especially deep knowledge of the Brazilian context. That's the case of Eduardo Queiroz. Eduardo, it's a pleasure to have you here. Edu, let me start. Thank you, Jason. Perfect. Let me start with a question to you. Your professional journey started with the private sector in a bank, the state government of São Paulo, through a Brazilian foundation. Now we are working in a large NGO, international NGO. Can you talk a little bit about your personal and professional journey? Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation, and UNINTER for the opportunity to be here today. It's an honor. Jason, I started working at a bank by chance, I can tell you that. I didn't have a plan. I studied business administration. I studied at UNIP, and I was working during the day, studying at night. Went to working at a broker dealer, the trading desk. I was a trader. I would buy and sell currency, dollar, yen. It was very interesting. I've learned a lot. Working at banks, it's really, it's high level of education. You have the opportunity to work at a bank. It's really worthwhile. You're gonna learn about what's the financial market, how things work, how the economy works. But I realized at a certain time that that wasn't exactly for me. I mean, I was doing pretty well, but I wasn't passionate about it. And then I decided to leave the financial markets And I left the financial institution. I went to work for the third sector, and with all the difficulties that we can find in an NGO. Initially, I started working as a volunteer for an NGO in Brazil to understand what it was, understand that they don't have enough money. And it was an awesome experience. And I decided to get ready. I had experience in banking, experience from the university that I did, but I didn't know deeply what I was doing in the third sector. So I registered for to take a class in Australia. The first tip that I can give you right now for the audience is that I said, okay, are they going to accept me there? So I applied. I did a very nice application. I was accepted. I went to Australia. I was there for a year, getting ready to work in the third sector in personal development. From there, I received an invitation to come back to Brazil and lead an NGO in Brazil, something that I didn't know that it was going to happen so fast. But since I had been a volunteer, I had the experience, went to educate. Someone found me there in Australia. I had some contacts here in Brazil, and I worked there for 3 years. Then it was an awesome experience. And then I started to do something else, Jason. That's when we met. I had never imagined that I'm going to be doing that. I thought that I would never be doing that. I didn't plan, and I didn't think I'll be able to do so. To do my master's degree at Kennedy School in Harvard, the government school in Harvard. They don't work only with government. They work with NGOs, third sector, child. I did my master's degree there in public administration. Not really government, the third sector, public administration. So, and I did an application, and I said, okay, I have 1% to be accepted, but I would try. And I did. I applied. I wrote down all my experience, my background, what I was doing at that time. And they not only accepted me, but they granted me a scholarship. So if you have a dream, you have to go after it. You have to believe. Then I went to the US. I did my master's there. It changed my life, opened my horizons. We think that it's you go to the university and you open your horizons. Okay, you do, but when you move abroad, when you do your master, especially in a top university, it's a different level. When I came back, I started working for the government. I was working at the education secretary at the state of São Paulo with Secretary Paulo Renato. And people thought that I was crazy. I came back to Brazil to make like a very low money. My wage wasn't the best, but I decided to take the challenge, and I left. I worked the Secretariat of the Education in São Paulo. Then when you work, we have a very bad feeling about government, and it was actually great. It was great. I started talking to people that I've never thought I would be talking to, different leaders, businessmen, and then I started working at a foundation that was not very well known at the time, but with a lot of money and a huge potential. And that's where I spent 8 years as the managing director and started working with early education. That's where I met Jason and started to elevate to the national level. And then, to summarize my background, it opened doors for me to work abroad, where I work today. I'm the vice president for Latin America and Caribbean, in the Caribbean. It's a small institution, but I take care of 15 offices in the region, where we can do different multilateral relationships, or work with NGOs. And we have to take a look at the local context, just like Sean said, and also the regional context. So for those who are starting now, you have to have a goal. Have a goal and go after, because it's doable. And I'm interested because you had the opportunity to work together in different perspectives, and you led an initiative that I found very interesting. We had different groups, different stakeholders participating. And can you tell us, how did you manage to work with traditional institutions, smaller institutions, and also different groups within this construction? Could you summarize this process to us? The early education that involved many institutions and people. Well, Jason, internet make our life easier. Look at some articles about collective impact. And let's do what we did. We did it together, which is go after large institutions, large cities as partners, but also smaller institutions. All at one end, working with these institutions. That's what we did, you know. These organizations had resources to do it alone, but we went after partnerships. We have different with, for example, with Fundação Vidigal. There are some projects, all of the projects that we did, we had partners to work with. We could do it alone, but our decision was always to work in partnership. So that's how we did. We tried to understand how the public sector, the public leaderships worked, private leadership, and third sector leaderships, and how we could convince these guys to work with us. We started in 2011. Nobody knew what early education was. And now we are at the Supreme Court in Brazil. It's part of, they're being discussed in the Congress. And little by little, it's getting to the population as a whole. And when you look at that, this is an impact project. So it's feasible. You have to be patient. You have to be humble. You need to know how to listen, just like what Sean said. You need to understand the context where you're working, with whom you're working with, what are the interests behind all these people, because there's always an interest. And then we'll be able to play the game in brackets. So you can make your cause progress. It can be education, health, hunger, any cause. You will figure out the cause you want to work with or who you are working for, and need to be humble and map that Xiao talked so eloquently about. Now, I'm going to ask you our final question, and then I'm going to pass the floor to Caroline, Professor Caroline. Let's go after our individual. You talked about institutions, groups, changes, national movements. Could you talk about you? You talked a little bit, go after your dream, right? Is there an advice that you could have for those who are listening to us today is about TEDx, or the way you as an individual went after your dream. Well, first of all, I think that what you said, to have a local experience is very important. To be a volunteer, we don't have this the volunteer character in Brazil as you have abroad, but I was a volunteer when I wanted to work, and I had to insist 4 times for the person to see me. This person didn't want to see me, and I was really annoying. Sometimes you have to be annoying. I have to go there once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. They're gonna realize how much you want to do it. And then I was a volunteer, and that allowed me to have the experience and knowledge to do something abroad and work almost as a volunteer in Australia. I was almost a volunteer there. I was there, I had food and board, but that's everything that I had for a year. But it was crucial to open my mind and broaden my knowledge. And when I came back to Brazil, that's what people were looking for. And it was not making a lot of money at all, but it opened me doors that I thought that would happen in 4 or 5 years. And that's where I embraced everything. I worked hard to do that. And as I said before, Jason, I've ended up in Harvard. Maybe I was some of the few students who ended up in Harvard. It was a dream that I had. There was more than a planning. It was a dream. You're gonna really find obstacles on your way. They're gonna call you to work somewhere else, make more money. Focus. If you have that goal, you need to focus. You can even have some take some different path, but you don't have to let your life take you. No, you have to focus on your dream, because otherwise you're gonna end up somewhere else. I wake up every day willing to work. That's wonderful. Perfect. Thank you so much. And I'm gonna pass the floor to you. And this dedication and willingness with other people is very important. I was lucky enough to work with people as motivated as you, and being able to wake up in the morning and knowing that you're working with these people is what makes me wake up, because you're gonna find obstacles all the time. And with that, I pass the floor to Professor Carolini. Thank you so much, Sean and Edu. It's a great pleasure to see you guys again. Sorry, but Carol, you are on mute, but we can barely hear you. We can barely hear you. If she needs to use the mic. Okay, Jason is helping her out. Live, everything can happen, okay? Can you hear me? Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to be here today, Eduardo, and also Sean, to be able to listen to what you had to say, share your experience, and I'm gonna ask Xiao to excuse myself and speak Portuguese. Since I have all the questions coming up in Portuguese, I would like to be able to talk to our audience today, and thank you all of our students who are here with us today. I'm gonna try to summarize everything here today. So I have 3 questions, one question to each one of you and one question to both of you. All right, so I'm gonna start, if you allow, Eduardo, I'm gonna start to ask a question to Dr. Cao, and then I will go back to Eduardo, and then I will gonna end up to a question to both of you, if you allow me. Before, I'd like to thank you so much for those who submitted their questions. Many people congratulating us and saying how important it was to listen to what you had to say. So a first question that I have here, Dr. Cao, is we received in our chat this question, and it is the following. The question is a challenge. Let me try to do it. At the World Bank, what would you say that is your greatest challenge? And how did you face this challenge? What did you do to face this challenge? I don't have the name of our student here, but thank you for the question. And if you can answer it to us today, what was your greatest challenge, and what did you do to overcome this challenge?
Okay, thank you very much. And this, I don't know, it's sort of a specific aspect in terms of challenge, but just let me try to answer it based on my understanding. I think internally, I would say, inside the World Bank, I would say a big challenge is that how you can work with your colleagues effectively who are from very different cultural backgrounds, because my colleagues, I have colleagues from Africa, from Middle East, from Europe, from Asia, I'm from Latin America, and so on, almost everywhere in the world. So everyone has sort of different perspectives and bringing different culture, both for work and for just outside the office. So how you are going to work with them effectively or become friends, let's say, it's also important. And so how to handle this challenge, and this requires quite a few things. First of all, it requires you to be open-minded, to accept different opinions and different culture, and to be respectful to everyone, right? And to listen. And it's very important. I think I mentioned it before, the listening skill is very important, that for you to try to understand their point of view and why they agree or disagree with you, and why they do things differently from the way you would like to see the things to be done. Because everyone, we grew up in different culture, in each culture society, there is a specific sort of a way of doing things everyone understands in that society and a culture. But when you come all together, my team, I have right now, for example, my Iraqi team, I have the team members from 5 or 7 different countries. Some of them from Middle Eastern countries, so they understand the language and the culture and the custom and behavior. So I'm relying on them to tell me whether something is appropriate or not. Because we work as a team, we have to be effective. We cannot just guessing and do something, just think that this is the way you think should be done. So this is the sort of a challenge, how to work in a multi culture environment. I think going forward, the world, you know, we're all living in a global world. You know, it doesn't matter, you know, you live inside Brazil or you live elsewhere, you will interact with foreigners, you will have chance to work in organizations where people from different backgrounds. I'm pretty sure even in Brazil, from different states, you know, people have different views, right? So I think this is very important to keep that in mind. It is a challenge, you know, it will challenge you as a person. A lot of things you sort of grew up with or you brought up with, and you have to sort of question that, and you have to challenge that. You have to be willing to accept that your view probably is not the best view. You know, there are other views. Other people are more clever than you. You know, so that's one thing inside. You know, working with the multicultural kind of brilliant, you know, sort of colleagues. And outside, when you work with clients, I think the biggest challenge is that to put yourself in their shoes. Because, you know, you may think that, okay, this is important, why you're not doing it? Or this is the way it should be done, you know, because it's successfully done in other countries. But it may not necessarily what they see things. I mean, if yes, this is probably a more appropriate way to do things, you need to help them to understand. In any way, you need to put yourself in their shoes to sort of try to see the world and the issues from their perspective. Then you will find a common language. And so you can sit down and sort of discuss and debate. And because you already created a safe environment for different opinions. So no one is going to be hurt if you say something different. And you know that everyone's voice will be heard. And so I think these things maybe sound like small, you know, compared to grand vision, you know, the things you want to do. But if you don't sort of pay attention to these small things, these challenges, and the big vision may not be achieved. So I stopped here. I hope this is useful.
Yes, thank you very much for your answer. It was really useful. Actually, we did have more questions. One question was about culture. So in your answer, we got that. And also we had a question about the state, Brazilian states. So you also talked about it. So thank you very much. The students were asking exactly that. We have different states and different levels of education. So it's a challenge to deal with all these differences. So thank you very much for your answer, for sure. Our students really appreciate it. And so, excuse me, now I'm going to speak in Portuguese, so I'm going to do the questions to Eduardo. Eduardo, muito obrigada.
Eduardo, thank you so much. Your life story is very inspiring. How much your experience and what you've told us is inspiring and motivating them. Because we don't have much time, I'm going to be very straightforward. We're going to have to close with this final question. And Aline, our student here, she asked a very interesting question, and that is, from your experience, from what you studied, from all that you have in your background, how can we change education? Do we need to have a mix of private sector and public policies and the third sector? This triad, this tripod is necessary to progress in educational projects, especially in early education. Well, in my opinion, it's crucial. It's very clear that for me, what is that the government alone, they are not able to do so. So not only in terms of education, but also health, social, and the third sector is crucial to be part of it. If we close all NGOs, it will stop the health system in Brazil, period. Our health system works with the support of the third sector, the NGOs, and in education, it's the same. Private sector as well. We find some resistance there for the private sector to help in the different levels of education. But in my opinion, the private sector has technology, experience, and I think sometimes they have this experience that the government doesn't have. So I think that the public sector must be open to work with the private sector and the third sector as well. And we then will be able to improve the quality of our education in Brazil. I think that's crucial. Not only access to people, but also kids, but also it needs to be a quality education. It doesn't matter if you have a school there, but if the quality is not good. So for me, the answer is yes. It's not easy, but this tripod is that's gonna take us to a different level. All right, thank you so much. I'm not gonna we don't have time for another question, but I made a list. We have more than 30 questions from our students throughout your presentation. So they are really participating. Maybe at a different time, you're probably gonna be able to answer these questions, and more questions we answer, more questions will be coming up. So thank you so much for being here with us, sharing your experience with our students. They are all so thankful. And again, I'd like to thank the organization, our students who are here today, who contributed with their questions. So to mention some of them, Elsie, who's here, Sarah, I also saw Adriano, well, Under, Wagner, they've sent so many questions to us. Thank you so much. I need to select some of them. Don't be mad, but we try to ask one single question that will be able to encompass all your questions. So I'd like to invite Professor Flor so we can have our cultural moment here. So thank you, Professor Carolina. Thank you all. Welcome to all of us. It's a pleasure to be here to present this cultural time. So many important issues, so much relevant issues to be discussed. Now I'm going to take a step back and let's talk about music. Bossa Nova was a renewal, the samba, bringing samba, some of the American jazz, and we created a new genre that was born during the 50s. We had some different names like Tom Jobim, Ronaldo Boscoli, João Gilberto Toquinho, and Roberto Menescal. Listen what I have. What I have here today is the icon of Bossa Nova, and the student of our one of our undergrad students who is composing with Roberto Menescal, and he composed the song, and that's gonna be here with Roberto Almeida and Roberto Menescal. I like to talk a little bit about composing. People send things by email. We don't have this face-to-face dialogue. There's a fun story about we don't have like ta-ta-ta. We have the little boat song. This romance that we used to have. It's a little bit tougher now, but we find out new things. You know, the way we can like make songs with someone from Japan. I just did a song with a guy from Japan, another from Ireland. Before we weren't been able to do it. Like 30 years ago, I wouldn't be able to send him a letter, but we can do some interesting stuff right now. Now, Menescal, what do you think that could define a soul or a whole musician? I have many whole musicians. Something that I can tell you is someone who has the talent, who has music inside them, and those who study music who can become a wonderful musician. So I'm left-handed, so I had to play with someone else's guitars. I couldn't change the strings, but so far, for me, it's hard to play fast a guitar. I can do it right, but I'm not fast. No? So I developed my harmonical side. For example, I just recorded a song with my daughter-in-law. I changed the lyrics, you know, to I found a cat.
O bichinho adormeceu, comovido eu abracei, e o gatinho de repente agradeceu.
Poxa!
Em uma casa colorida, sempre a vida e muito amor. Em uma casa com carisma e sempre visita, nunca tem dor. A casa é o santuário do amigo, é o abrigo, a reflexão. A casa simboliza o espírito que dança contigo, nunca diz não. santuário do amigo, é o abrigo, a reflexão, a casa simboliza o espírito que dança contigo, nunca diz não.
Opa! Amanhã, no último
Sarah.
dia do Global Meeting, eu
Tomorrow,
estarei aqui
on
mais
the
uma
final
vez
day of
para
our Global
apresentar
Meeting, I'll
mais
be
um
here
momento
today
cultural
to
para vocês, né?
present
Com uma grande
another
alegria. Que
cultural
delícia de música, né,
moment.
gente? Ah, que
Wonderful
gostoso.
song.
Então, agora eu quero
Just
convidar para
so nice.
a
Now I'd like to
palavra
invite
o
you all,
Jason, o professor
and I'm going to pass the
Jason.
floor to Professor
Então,
Jason.
professora Flor, agradeço
Thank you,
assim,
Professor
muito a
Flo.
colaboração. É
Flor,
sempre importante ter essa questão
I'd like to
cultural, que
thank you
também
for
passa,
this
obviamente, assim, pela música.
collaboration.
Mais
This
uma vez, eu
cultural
estou muito
part
feliz e grato em
is
estar aqui
always
na
wonderful.
sede da
Again,
Inter em
I'm
Curitiba
really glad to
e
be
em
able to
ter
be here
o
in
Eduardo,
Curitiba with
assim,
you
de
guys,
outros cantos assim do
and
Brasil, Estados Unidos
and having
Sean, thank you
Eduardo
so
and
much.
Sean.
It's been fantastic having you
Muito
here with us.
obrigado, foi fantástico
And
ter
also
você
just
aqui
in
com a gente
closing,
hoje.
queria
E para fechar,
agradecer a
gostaria.
professora Carol, que tem
I'd
colaborado
like to
muito.
thank
Acho
you,
que assim,
Professor
o que a gente
Carol,
vem
who's been
falando
helping
nisso
us
aqui,
so
sem
much.
inspirar, né, crer que é
Think
possível,
we've been
correr
talking
atrás do
about
sonho, não se
inspiring,
atrapalhar aí
to know
com os
that it's
problemas
possible
que
to go
todos têm, alguns
after
mais do que
your
outros,
dreams.
claro, né,
We
mas
all have issues and
continuar para
problems,
frente, que é
but we need to
importante, e se
carry on.
rodear
It's
de pessoas
important,
que nem está aqui na
and we
tela
need to
agora,
surround ourselves of
maravilhosas,
people
que
like
realmente
those
têm
we have
interesse
here today.
em ajudar e
People who
fomentar,
is willing
formar
to help
pessoas,
and
né? Então,
foster
parabéns a todos que estão participando do evento,
forming
que
people. I'd
estão
like to thank you all
trabalhando de
who
noite,
are
né,
participating
nos
in this event,
estudos,
who's been
finais de semana
working
nos
here
estudos,
in the
trabalhando de
evening,
dia.
studying
Eu acho que
in the
assim, não tem
evening and
muito
working during the
segredo e
day.
temos de suar para avançar.
There's no magic.
Então,
We need
estão todos de
to
parabéns, foi um prazer
sweat
tê-los
to
conosco e a gente
progress. It was
aguarda
a pleasure to have you
amanhã para a
here today.
continuidade
And
desta
tomorrow
importante série de
we are gonna have
Global Meeting.
more.
Boa noite a todos e
Good
todas.
evening.